The fighting game community is no stranger to interesting storylines. The latest is how the negative reception of a singular game sparked a positive reception to multiple games. Like in any community, it is rarely the case when all of the community's principles are in fact an accurate reflection on all of its members, which is the situation the FGC has dealt with practically since its inception. The FGC at face value is a community who enjoys fighting games and everything that goes with them. But in retrospect, that description sells the overall idea of the FGC short, as there are many factors to fighting games, such as analytical breakdown, entertainment value, psychological elements, and many others. Considering all those components, it should come to no surprise that preference plays a big part in which fighting games are highlighted and which are not. It was that very element of preference that led to a majority-minority situation, which subsequently resulted in a divide among the community. In hindsight, the FGC took fighting games, a subgenre of video games, and divided itself into even smaller groups within what was already a niche community to begin with. If we exclude the outliers in games like Dive Kick or special variations like the Mortal Kombat series and the use of a block button, fighting games as they currently stand are categorized as one of three types of games: traditional 2D games, 3D-based movement games, and anime fighting games. The reason behind the categorization of these games is to do with the rule set they are held accountable to. Fighting games like Street Fighter and the King of Fighters follow the traditional 2D rule set of having only 4 options when it comes to the movement on a 2-dimensional plane, those being up, down, left, and right. The same can be said for 3D-based movement games like Tekken and Soul Calibur, only with the difference being instead of 2 dimensions, the player is free to sidestep on a 3-dimensional plane. Anime fighting games are closer to 2D traditional based gameplay with regards to structure, however they usually expand the rule set when it comes to being able to cancel most if not all moves into other moves, as well as other factors such as high jumping, air blocking, and advanced guarding. Now, it wasn't until recently that these categories were extremely prominent in the FGC with regards to how specific games were being treated. The traditional 2D games were held up high on a pedestal thanks to the popularity of Capcom's Street Fighter IV, while other games like Tekken Tag Tournament 2 and BlazBlue Chrono Phantasma were often deemed as lesser titles and not worth the time of the mainstream crowd. To add to that fact, Street Fighter IV's popularity became one so dominant in the FGC that even games like Killer Instinct and the King of Fighters 13 that did follow the similar rule set of traditional 2D games were also treated somewhat poorly once the honeymoon period wore off. However, as unexpected as it was, Street Fighter IV's success and popularity did not translate over to Street Fighter V, rather the opposite. The components and gameplay elements that made Street Fighter IV a fan favorite and the darling of the FGC were mostly missing from its successor. It took roughly a year of Street Fighter V constantly faltering and multiple PR failures by Capcom that those who hoped things would change realized that it may be time to transition over to something else. A movement which picked up steam upon releases of titles such as Tekken 7, Injustice 2, and Guilty Gear Xrd Revelator 2. While it wasn't for everyone, 2017 has been somewhat of a transitional year for many in the FGC, as there was an overall sense that those who may have once belittled game titles that weren't Street Fighter IV have become more tolerant and accepting of other fighting games upon moving on from Street Fighter V. Though it is factored in the equation, it should be noted that Street Fighter V's deficiencies and Capcom's fall from grace did not make other games suddenly better. Rather, it was the community's perception of these games that changed. Fighting game series like Tekken and the King of Fighters have been good enough to be appreciated by their niche audience for years. However, it was the overwhelming shadow cast by Street Fighter IV and its fans that made these titles less than what they actually were, which was actually quite good. It's not how the fighting game community wanted it to happen, however, the downfall of Street Fighter V was in fact a significant factor in shining the light on other games who may not have gotten it otherwise. Fighting game fans playing and spectating the games they truly enjoy is what the FGC really should be all about, and not because a certain game is deemed better than another by a vocal majority. In closing, even though many have transitioned over to other games, there are still a lot of others in the FGC who enjoy the new direction of Street Fighter V, and while the game may have lost a certain amount of its traditional market, it did gain a new, perhaps more modern market that does share the vision that Capcom has for Street Fighter V.